Alright folks, you're not going to like this video and it's not going to make you feel good. Happy Mother's Day. Elder care. It's something that some of you may be experiencing, and I'm talking primarily about elderly parents, grandparents, even elderly siblings that are to one extent or another less capable of being on their own or taking care of themselves to the greater extent that they were 5, 15, 20 years ago. Some of them may be at home in their house or their apartment and you check up on them daily. They may be living with someone. They may have a good neighbor, an old friend that, keeps an eye on them. Others might be in facilities. It could be anything from the senior citizen style housing where they've got community centers and the city bus that'll come by, pick them up, take them out to the mall, whatever the case may be. Some might be in facilities where they're effectively speaking a fancier, higher end hospital where you have nurses and attendants and counselors that basically track and monitor and take care of them. They may be in a situation where their meals are provided and they have all the medical facilities available to take care of them, or they may be in a similar situation where they're living on their own with a little bit of observation and monitoring, but by and large they stay to one extent or another housebound. They really don't go anyplace. Some of them, you may have the loved ones that you have may have physical disabilities. They may have mental challenges where they are to a greater extent restricted in their mobility or in their capabilities to go out and about on a normal basis. That being said, not even looking in the current situation that we're at and not even going into the scenarios that I've talked about on this channel and that we as preppers are preparing for, you have to take into the effectively the account of what happens when certain things go down. Anything at all can dramatically change how you are going to respond to that. Are your loved ones, the elderly, are they in the same city as you? Are they in the next town over, the next state over, halfway across the country? Are you the sole caretaker and provider for them, or are you, to one extent or another, the advocate or the person who simply signs off on whatever it is that needs to be done? What do you have lined up in your plans as a prepper to both take care of yourself and your immediate needs and to take care of them? What do you have set up in a situation where maybe if they are in a facility and they are a person who is still somewhat mobile, still somewhat capable, are you helping them stock up supplies there? Is the place that they're at capable of basically maintaining itself in a grid down situation? Does the area that you're in get hurricanes? Do they have a hurricane plan? Tornadoes, earthquakes, that sort of thing. We've all seen some of the different stories that come out of elderly homes and facilities. Some of them, it's purely mismanagement and abuse by staff. Other cases, it's just a bad situation that got worse when you have not enough people with an idea of how to handle certain situations when regards to taking care of the elderly. These are things that most people that have not gone through it, and I myself have gone through an elder care situation multiple times, it's not easy. It's not something that you can just go, oh, I'll just do this, this, and this, because you also have to take into account that you're still dealing with an individual. You're still dealing with a person that, for one situation or another, does not want to be treated like a child. They are the person that either raised you or watched you grow up and helped you develop into the individual that you're at. So suddenly you now trying to take the reins and control of their life, they're going to fight you. And it's going to be, in some cases, pure frustration. And I'm sure some of you that are watching this right now know exactly what I'm talking about, where you try to move them 2 steps forward, but they put their feet down and they're not going. They're going to go the pace that they want to go, when they want to go, and do what they want to do. Other cases, you may be in a situation where, again, sorry to bring down the mood that may be the Happy Mother's Day that it is, but that's just how I do things. They may be in a situation where they are not going to be able to take care of themselves under those conditions that may come up, and that any type of resistance they may have simply may be because in their current state of mind, they're not fully grasping what's going on and what could happen. From their perspective, it may all be memories of things that have happened, or it may be some confusion with regards to where they're at and what they're doing at that present time in that moment. And in many cases, under stressful conditions, under a panic condition, that can cause them to sort of pull in and regress to a different mindset, a place where you don't need them to be at that moment. You need them to be present and with you if you are there physically trying to help them and get them moving. You have to take into account, of course, all your day in and day out legal things. There are certain elder care and residential facilities that allow them, depending upon their condition, to have effectively small little kitchens in their apartments where they can microwave stuff and they can store some food. Others, it's a no-no. All the food is maintained and prepped in the kitchen where the staff can keep an eye on it, because the last thing they want is house fires raging through the complex. Some have vehicles that take residents out to hospitals, and they have contracts with ambulance services to pick them up, things like that. Some have on-staff nursing and medics and EMTs and trained personnel. Others, they may have nurses that act as aides and assistants, but if anything critical or serious comes up, they still have to wait for 911 to show up. They don't have the equipment and the necessary things there to deal with anything other than a few bumps and bruises, and not much more than that. Looking at things from a prepping perspective, and it's going to sound somewhat cold and detached, but you have to look at the level of commitment that you have to them as an individual, as a loved one, in direct comparison to the level of commitment you have to them as a potential drain on your resources, a liability. To what extent are you going to go? Where are you going to push that balance on the scale in protecting them and taking care of them? And looking at it from not simply a storm passed through and the power was knocked out for a few hours, but looking at from the perspective of there may be no power, or the cost of living for you on your own is beginning to skyrocket due to inflation, due to the lack of resources coming in, which also ties into, if they're in a facility, those facilities still have to pay their power. Those facilities still have to pay for food. They still have to pay for staffing. All of that is going to go up. And if you're in a situation where maybe you've gotten lucky enough and there's an insurance that's paying for it, or you are in some type of program with the state and that's being paid for, and you have very little out-of-pocket expense, you may still see an increase. There may be additional fees from that service that start coming up and starting increasing, and that may be something that either you have to pay for yourself, or if they have money set aside, they have to start dipping into that. Either way, you're going to be looking at a situation where you may run into a condition where you cannot afford to keep them safe in that one place, that one facility, and the paperwork, the hoops and the hurdles you went through to get them there in the first place are going to be 3 times higher and harder if you try to move them someplace else, either someplace closer or someplace where you have a bit more flexibility and how you can take care of them. And then that runs into the situation that if they're not already presently living with you for whatever the reasons are, maybe you don't have the space, you don't have the capability of making sure that they have the things that they need. They may be infirm to an extent, and you might have one bathroom upstairs and they can't go up and down the stairs, that sort of thing. You don't also, again, have the immediate finances to then have an additional bathroom built, or have the room expanded where you want to keep them, or buy another house that's more capable for them. Looking into the time it would take you to do that, and then of course, unfortunately, balancing out the time that they may have left alive, as it were. Pure, plain and simple. You may decide that, okay, we're going to do an expansion on the house, we're going to add this, this, and this, get the contracts all set up, and by the time the work starts, it might be 3 months down the road, and it still might be another 4 months before it's completed. Depending upon their physical state as it is, they may not make it, or they may get to that certain point where they're back in another facility because, once again, you can't take care of them. If they're in a situation where you are not present where they're at, you're on the other side of the country, they're in a different state, whatever the case may be, you can't get out as often as you want to check on them, whether that be 2-3 times during the year, special holidays, whatever it is. And in an emergency situation, you're not going to be able to navigate through the distance from where you're at to where they're at if the whole world is falling apart. It's taking it to the extreme, yes, but it's at that extreme level, that's where you need to think, and that's where you need to plan. It's one of those cases where if you can take it from the top level, the absolute worst situation that you can imagine, and then step it back, bring it down, and look at all the other situations leading up to that, that at least you will have a better idea of what you can and can't do on a realistic level. It's a hard topic. It's a hard call to make. It's one of those things where You literally say to yourself, I hope to God that this doesn't happen, but if, and you just leave it at that. Because we all know, for those of us that have been in those situations, and for those of you that are still in that situation where you're trying to do your best to take care of that person, it's not easy. Just on a day-to-day basis, it's not easy. You wake up and hope that nothing has gone wrong, and then you have to start planning the next thing to do for that day, that week, whatever it is. You're, constantly going over the numbers. You're always looking to figure out what it is that you need to handle next, and then something comes up from the side and it's unexpected, or some other situation happens. And like I said, for those of you that have elderly parents or elderly people that you're taking care of, if they're still to a certain extent maintaining their independence, even if from your perspective they're not doing as well, from their perspective they're cruising along fine, and they may not see the need for all the extra attention you're giving them, or they may not see the need to do certain things that you're trying to express and impress upon them that need to get done. Sometimes you can get away with slick stuff. You can sneak food in, you can sneak clothing in, you can buy a few extra things here and there, keep them boxed up and bagged up, ready to go, so they always have them at the very minimum. If you know what they buy and put on their shelves, you buy more of it and just tuck it to the back. So one day when they call up and say, oh, I need this, this, and this, you can just say, hey, open up the cabinet, left-hand side behind this, there it is. And that's taken care of. Other situations, if you've got good neighbors, good friends that are in the area, maybe you can enlist them. Say, hey, look, help me out with this, swing by once in a while, knock on the door, have a cup of coffee, whatever the case may be, just to keep an eye on, just to sort of give you the heads up if something's starting to go a little bit sideways. But the overall purpose is, if you're going to be a prepper and you're going to plan ahead, and as much as we like to think that we can plan for most of the regular eventualities, that by itself is still a difficult thing to comprehend, that you as an individual person may have to make that decision. Am I going to prep with this elder person in mind, bringing them into the plans as a whole, or am I going to have a cutoff, as it were, that there's a certain point where I just cannot handle or help beyond my means, beyond the capability, without it becoming a detriment to the rest of my group, my family, everyone else? And unfortunately, these are things that I will say I'd rather you think about now, here, when hopefully nothing is going far worse than it already is, than a week, a month, a year down the road. And some of you through COVID may have had that experience. You may have had a far worse experience in those situations, depending upon the state that you're in and the city that you're in regards to elder care and the things that were going on in some of the nursing facilities. So once again, sorry about this video, but it was on my mind and it was just something that I had to get out there. So again, I'll catch you guys later in the next one.